If you recall, in the first class, we tried to define characteristics of academic writing, comparing it with other kinds of writing such as journalistic, creative and writing in interpersonal contexts. We also saw that academic writing has its own specific characteristics. Um, Writers have to follow some conventions, and language is usually formal and it has a specific structure. So, now moving on, we now look at how we write an essay, a writing task, a write up. The first step which we are going to cover in this class is interpreting the given task and preparing an outline. So, before we move to the first step to look at it in detail, I have listed general process of writing an essay or a small write up. The first is interpreting task requirements. Second is gathering information, details. Some tasks require you to use details from your personal experiences, personal life, whereas for some others you have to refer to sources and gather information. Then you assess the reading text available to you and choose most appropriate. Out of those, again you focus on areas only which are relevant to you, and then it is very important you keep record of what you have referred to, the name of the author, the name of the book, page numbers and so on. These things you keep record for writing references later on. Then when you are reading, you make notes, and you can also use skills such as paraphrasing and summarizing. These things are very crucial, say when you are doing a review of previous research, and also when you are reading several texts for examination purposes. So, if you have paraphrased or summarized, you can quickly refer to these things later on. Then sometimes you need to combine a variety of sources. You need to refer to different books, different kinds of texts and so on. If the task demands, you may have to conduct a small research study. For example, you design a questionnaire and administer it and gather data. Then you choose appropriate structure for presenting your ideas and analyzing the data you have collected. Most often this is determined by the task itself, that we are going to see very soon, that the task given to you itself expects you of to choose a specific structure. Then you write your text, you develop your text. The next step is you get feedback. This is optional in the sense, if you have friends who can help you, or if you can show it to somebody else and get their opinion, feedback on your first draft, that will help you refine your write up. Then as a writer, you yourself should read and if necessary reread several times what you have written and rewrite portions which you think need to be reworked. This is a very important step. Most often what happens is there is a task and some time is given. Students usually spend all of it just on writing and they do not have enough time to just go back to the text and revise it. But if you want good grades, if you want your writing to be more effective, this step is very crucial. Finally, you check your write up for spelling and grammar mistakes. These days, word processing software has these tools. You can also do it manually, but this is again a very important step. If the final version you have submitted has some silly spelling or grammar mistakes, that really does not look well. So, this final editing and proofreading is a very important step. So, during the next few lectures, we are going to look at these steps in detail. So, I am going back to this. So, today we are going to look at the first step in this process, that is interpreting the task and understanding what exactly you need to do. So, it may sound very silly. Okay, there is a question, I read it, I understand it. This is what many people feel. Do we really need to worry about this stage? Surprisingly, many students get lower grades because they read the task in a hurry, they do not understand it, and as a result they digress. So, they write on something which is not required, spend their time and space on it, and actually they do not focus on what is actually expected of them. So, the first step in preparing a good write up is understanding what exactly you are required to do. So, you interpret the given topic and understand clearly what is required. So, here you understand sub areas to be covered and the areas which should be left out of this. We will look at some examples and then this will become clear. Then when you interpret the topic, you also decide what kind of organization, what kind of discourse strategy you are going to use. Are you going to use narrative techniques, description, or cause effect, or is it an expository kind of structure it is demanding? So, that we will look at each of these discourse strategies in detail during this the course. Once we have decided on the best organization, we then plan an essay outline so that this helps us to go looking for relevant resources, collect information and then write our essay. As I have already mentioned, interpreting the given task correctly is very important to stay on track. So, often students spend a lot of time and space on background details and or unnecessary aspects. In such cases, automatically your write up will get lower grade, though you may have very good language in terms of grammar and vocabulary. For example, we will now look at some examples. So, here are some questions and some subsections are listed under these questions. Let us decide which ones we should include and which ones we should not. So, let us look at the first example. This is to what extent is technology affecting our lives? If this is the task given to you, what would you include under it? Options are a definition of technology, a report on the widespread use of cell phones, a case study showing how social media has affected public lives. Option D, a proposal for new methods of communication technology. Let us look at these things one by one. The question is, to what extent is technology affecting our lives? So, the question here kind of assumes there is an effect of technology on our lives and it expects us to give details of it. In such a case, would it be prudent to include a detailed definition of technology? Perhaps no. You may very briefly say what comes under this and come straight to the point. A report on the widespread use of cell phones. This may seem relevant. Yes, cell phone has become an integral part of our life and hence it may be wise to include it. But the question we need to ask is, this report, is it just going to have some statistics about the widespread use, or does it also tell us something about how it is impacting our lives? Note here, the question very specifically asks how it is affecting us. So, it is not asking us about the widespread use, it is about the effect. So, the report, if it has only some stats about the widespread use, then probably we need not include it. C, a case study showing how social media has affected public lives. Social media again has become very important part of it. So, how this is affecting our lives? So, it sounds relevant, but here again the use of social media here has to be linked with technology. So, for example, with smartphones we are always on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and many other such social platforms, and therefore, it is affecting us. Then it is relevant for the task. D, a proposal for new methods of communication technology. This is definitely out of the range. The question is asking whatever technology is around us, how is it affecting us? This is in no way asking us to come up with new methods, right. So, therefore, D is completely out. Let us look at one more example. The question here is, why are marriages failing in India? So, if this is the question and you have to write a longish essay, a write up, what would you include under this? The options are data about divorce cases in India in the last 5 years, list of cases pending before courts in India, comparison between a joint family and a nuclear family, a case study of domestic violence. Let us look at A. Data about divorce cases in India in the last 5 years. This again here, note here, this is most likely a descriptive piece of data. So, how many cases this year, how many cases this year, that kind of information. The question is, you have to go into causes. So, if by using this data you can link it with some causes, then it is fine. But if you only include this data, then it is not completely relevant. Second one, list of cases pending before courts in India. Here the problem is the two generalized term cases. What cases are we talking about here? Are these divorce cases, or does it include everything else as well? So, we need to look at this more carefully before including it. C. Comparison between a joint family and a nuclear family. This here, some people argue that because of the increase of nuclear families, divorce cases are increasing in India. However, here this is only a comparison between a joint family and a nuclear family. Does this comparison include the specific advantages, say joint family, and specific disadvantages of nuclear family, and does it establish any connection between nuclear family, characteristics of a nuclear family, and the increasing number of divorce cases? So, we need to look at this point very carefully. D. A case study of domestic violence. Probably yes, this is relevant. If you look at a family and see the problems between husband and wife, then you might be able to pinpoint some causes for this kind of rift between husband and wife, and then of course you need to link it with divorce. You must be able to establish that several cases of domestic violence lead to divorce. So, you need to be very clear about the topic, and whatever the data which you come across, it should be directly relevant to the task. Please note here that you will have specific time given to you, and the word limit is also prescribed. Therefore, if you include something which is irrelevant, you lose on both. This is more so relevant in case of computer based exams, say IELTS, GRE, many such exams these days have a computer version, and there it is strictly timed. So, if you spend your energy on talking about something which is not directly relevant, you will lose marks. So, it is very important to look at the topic carefully and first very clearly decide what subsections I am going to include and what subsections I should not include. Okay, moving on. Now, let us look at a task and clearly analyze it to understand what it actually means. The task is: narrate an incident from your personal life which made you realize one of your hidden potentials. So, in this task, or for any task, usually there are three things you need to look for. These are called command word, area and specific focus. So, if we take this particular task, what are these? So, in this task, the command word is narrate. So, it is an action word. It is directly addressed to the students, those who take this task. So, this is a very specific action word. So, here the command word, the action word is narrate. So, what does narrate mean? So, it usually means you give details of an incident which has occurred in the past, or you give details of a chain of incidents. And the important thing is these are given in a chronological fashion, starting from the oldest to the most recent. Another important thing is the events you give details, these could be real, something from your personal life or something you have witnessed, or it could be completely imaginary, as happens in usually stories. So, going back to the question, so narrate is the command word here. So, what is the area? So, area, if you can see here, it is an incident from your personal life. So, the task very clearly says an incident, a single incident, and personal life. So, these are key things. So, this is area, you can say here. Then it further moves on to specify what kind of an incident. So, this we call specific focus. So, the specific focus is which an incident from personal life which made you realize one of your hidden potentials. So, we are not looking at any incident from your personal life. This should have made you realize one of your hidden potentials. So, now which of the following would you include for this task? So, recall the question is narrate an incident from your personal life which made you realize one of your hidden potentials. So, for this task, what are you going to include? There are 4 options. Talk about an incident from a famous person's life. Talk about multiple incidents from your life. Talk about an incident in which you got success after initial failures or hardships. Fourth one, talk about you are winning a competition, though you were hesitant to participate initially because you thought you would lose it. So, which one is most relevant for this task? Let us look at them one by one. Talk about an incident from a famous person's life. We have all read biographies of famous personalities, maybe Mahatma Gandhi or Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and so on. The question here is you have to talk about an incident which made realize hidden potentials, but if you include an incident from another person's life, that defeats the purpose, because the question clearly says from your personal life. So, this is clearly out. You may include it just for effect, something like say, see, this is what happened in the life of so and so, and a similar thing happened in my life as well, then yes. But if you include only this, it is irrelevant. Second one, talk about multiple incidents from your life. So, in our lives, we have always had several ups and downs, some special incidents where we were very happy or very sad and so on. Most often what I have observed is students get carried away and they include details of all such incidents which they consider special in their life for a task like this. What happens is you lose focus. The task clearly says one incident and that too has a specific purpose. So, this is a little irrelevant and you have to be cautious. Third one, talk about an incident in which you got success after initial failures or hardships. It sounds relevant. Yes, you may have had problems in the beginning and later on you became successful. So, for example, you were not sure of cracking an entrance exam, but you did it. But if you stop only at this level, your essay is incomplete, because the point is you have to show what potential you realized that you already had, but you were not aware of it. That point has to be clearly expressed. If you only include that, okay, I first was hesitant and then I took the exam and then I passed it. If you stop there, so what lesson did you learn from it? That point is not clear. Look at the last one. Talk about you were winning a competition, though you were hesitant to participate initially because you thought you would lose it. So, for example, a painting competition. You thought you won't be a good painter, there are many other people who do better than you, and hence you are hesitant, but later on you took part in it, and once you got into the competition, the best came out of you and you won the competition. Then did that tell you something about your hidden potential? If you focus on that, say, I didn't know that I am such a good artist, I can paint well, I have a good sense of color combination. So, if you bring out such points, then this will be very relevant for this particular topic. So, when you look at a task, you need to very clearly analyze it from these three perspectives. I am going back to this slide. So, command word, area and specific focus. So, all three are very important. So, here it says narrate an incident. So, it means you have to chronologically talk about it. If it says describe, you will have to adopt a different strategy. So, we will see differences among these discourse strategies later on. And again, you have to be very clear about area and specific focus. What exactly is the task focusing on? If you do not get that point, you will spend your energy, time, space on irrelevant things and you will end up getting a lower grade. We will now look at some more command words. Look at the questions listed here. Analyze the role of credit for development. State reasons to conserve nature. explain the law of conservation of mass with examples, examine the causes for the rise of communalism in India, compare and contrast the US democracy and ancient Greece democracy, suggest solutions to reduce global warming, relate political stability to growth of entrepreneurship. The words in bold, as you can see, are command words. Let us very quickly look at what these mean. So, the first one, analyze the role of credit for development. So, what does analyze mean? So, when somebody says analyze, you go deep into an issue, you divided it into sections, subsections, and look at each part very carefully. So, here the role of credit for development. So, you have to look at how credit is going to aid or it is not going to aid development, and under different sectors, for example, agriculture, production and so on. The second, state, reasons to conserve nature. State usually means you list points. Here you need to list points which very clearly are strong reasons to conserve nature. When you see the word state, too many details are not expected from you. Explain the law of conservation of mass with examples. When you see the word explain, details are expected from you, and as the question itself includes, you also have to give examples. You have to go into different stages, steps, procedures and do it in detail. Examine the causes for the rise of communalism. So, when you see the word examine, here you not only list, you also very clearly check if there is any truth behind it. So, for example, some people may give some reasons for this, say rise of communalism in India. So, you have to check whether each one is true or not. So, you bring in your personal judgment. Of course, this is not out of nothing. This is based on your previous readings, experts' opinion and other things. Compare and contrast. Usually these two words are used together. When we say compare, the common understanding is that we look at similarities between two or among more than two entities. Contrast, we focus on differences. The next one is suggest solutions to reduce global warming. So, suggest clearly indicates you have to come up with something new, and these are your personal views and opinions. And again, this whatever you suggest should have some logical base and some strong reasoning behind it. The last one, relate. When you see relate, it clearly means you have to show that two things mentioned here, political stability and growth of entrepreneurship. You have to clearly show that these two things are related, they are connected. When this goes up, this may also go up, or vice versa, or whatever the kind of relationship exists between the two entities, you have to clearly show with examples. You may come across some more words. Good idea is to refer to a good dictionary and find out what exactly that command word means. So, accordingly you can plan your essay. Now, we will look at some tasks and then decide what exactly is required in these tasks. The first one, identify the main causes of poverty in India. So, here would you present a case study of a poor family in rural India describing everyday hardships, or you list reasons that make people have low income and low quality of life and explain them. The third is list reasons for failure of the government schemes, suggest some steps which the government can take up to address issues. The key word here is identify. So, identify is again like kind of listing, but your listing has some logical base. So, B seems most appropriate. What is wrong with the other things? So, present a case study of a poor family in rural India describing everyday hardships. The key word here is describe. So, if you are describing the conditions in detail, you may not be focusing on causes. Here, list reasons for failure of the government schemes, how this is related to increase in poverty. So, that connection is not very clear here. Suggest some steps which the government can take up. This is clearly not relevant, because the question only says identify causes. It does not expect you to come up with solutions. So, this you may not want to include it. Let us look at one more example. This is a statement, with great power comes great responsibility. Elaborate this statement with examples. So, the key word here is elaborate and examples. So, what do we do here? Define the terms great power and great responsibility. Quote similar statements made by prominent personalities and explain them. Argue for decentralization of power to avoid dictatorship. Illustrate with examples the need to exercise caution while using immense powers. Definition of these terms, they are okay if you just very briefly touch upon them and then move on to the main factor. But if you spend a lot of time and space only on defining the terms, then it is an issue. Quote similar statements made by prominent personalities. This is again one of the common mistakes students do. When they see a statement like this, they try to quote similar statements made by others, and depending on their personal experiences or where they have read. So, from many sources, they might just go on quoting the statements and explaining the statement. So, what that statement means. But the question, it says elaborate this statement. So, it includes some amount of explanation, but also most importantly there should be examples. So, why examples? This kind of gives a concrete explanation. No matter how you try to explain, unless you give examples, that does not clearly get registered. So, therefore, mere explanation is only half job done. The next one, argue for decentralization of power to avoid dictatorship. Yes, it is true that dictatorship means there is a lot of power and therefore there is a lot of misuse, and therefore you may say we need to decentralize power, and so therefore there is nobody has great power. But look at the question again. This is there is a statement and it says elaborate this. So, here number C, your strategy is different. Here it becomes argumentative, but whereas here statement is given and you cannot argue either in favor or against, because that is completely out of frame. The question clearly only means, okay, here is a statement, what you understand by it, and the examples you quote makes me clear. So, C is bit of an issue here. D, illustrate with examples the need to exercise caution while using immense powers. Yes, so illustrate is a key word here. So, illustrate means use lot of examples, maybe anecdotes, personal accounts, narratives to support whatever the statements you are making. So, the statement is already given here and you just need to give relevant examples. So, we have looked at these two tasks, and it is very important to understand what these command words mean. So, when you come across a word like summarize, so it clearly means you need to focus on only key points, you need not go into details. So, when you see a word like describe, you have to give many details, preferably from as many sensory perceptions as possible. For example, describe your morning. So, if there is a question like that, so you describe different sensory perceptions. Morning, say birds, the cries of birds you hear, then pleasant aroma of coffee, and so on. So, the important thing is the command word. So, what it actually means. Accordingly, you will select details and you will plan your write-up. So, moving on. So, you have interpreted the task and you have clearly identified what I am going to include, what subsections I am going to include, what subsections are very clearly not relevant for this task, and then we plan a basic organization. We come up with an outline for our write-up. As mentioned in the previous lecture, most of essays, reports and articles have this simple structure of 3 parts: introduction, main body and conclusion. So, the main body, the structure of the main body, it varies according to the specific nature of the task. So, what does it mean? Say you have to narrate something. So, the main body will include events, a series of chain events arranged chronologically. Say your task is a description, then the main body will include several sensory perceptions arranged in some order. Say yours is a compare and contrast, then the main body probably first includes some similarities and then differences, or the other way around. So, the nature of the main body varies according to the task you have. So, once you have analyzed the questions and then you begin planning for your write-up. So, there are some steps which we can follow to arrive at a basic plan. So, analyze, the first is of course analyze the question and the keywords, note the main topics that you are going to cover, and then you divide the topic into subsections and write them down separately. Why? These separate sections, they could lead to different paragraphs of your write-up. For example, I will take that example of describing your usual morning. So, you have decided to include say some auditory images and some related to smell. So, you make two separate subsections, auditory images and other images related to smell. So, these two subsections will eventually lead to two different paragraphs. Or say you are talking about causes of poverty in India. So, you have listed social causes, economic causes, say other causes. So, these three different subsections will lead to three different paragraphs later on in your write up. Reread your notes and then you arrange them in a logical order. So, this is what I have mentioned earlier as well. So, there has to be some order. So, whether you are going to start with auditory images or some other, you choose an order. Of course, narration, it is chronological. There again you can start from the most recent and then go back, or you start with the oldest and then you come to the most recent. So, some logical order you need to follow. Then you write an outline plan using the topics you have arranged. So, this preparing your first plan is very crucial. So, because this will help you start collecting details. So, for example, you have decided to write on main causes of poverty in India, and you have identified 4 different subsections, say social, political, economic and others. So, under this you just brainstorm and list things. Say for example, social, maybe the community traditions, other factors, economic, say unemployment, other factors. So, you brainstorm and list tentative points under these subsections. Later on, you will explore each of these in detail. These points will help you go looking for materials. So, that is why it is so if you plan your outline, it will help you to be more selective and constructive in taking notes. It will help you in your reading, and of course, you can modify your plan as you go along. Say you do a thorough research and you do not come up with enough resources for one particular point, then you can decide to drop it, and instead you find something else more interesting, you can include it. So, there is always this flexibility of modifying your plan, but it is always good, it is always highly, it is advised to start with a plan and then you start collecting materials, you start collecting details. Otherwise, how are you going to go looking for resources? You are completely clueless. Where are you going to look for this? What kind of resources you need? So, if you have a plan, that helps. Now, let us look at a topic and develop a sample outline for this topic, this essay task. The question is, academic qualifications are of little practical benefit in the real world. Discuss. So, note here the command words and area and specific focus. The command word is discuss. So, discuss means you again look at multiple sides of an issue. Say, just as in a debate, there may be things in favor, maybe against, such options are there. What is the area here? Academic qualifications. So, what does this mean? Degrees, like your BTech, master degrees, then MBBS and so on. What is the specific focus here? Or of little practical benefit in the real world. So, the statement is very clearly taking a position where it says these qualifications have no practical benefit. Note here the difference between little and a little. So, you need to read very carefully, that is why the given task you have to read it very carefully. So, it has already taken a very clear position that the qualifications have very little benefit in the real world, and your task is to look at both the sides of this, and then you take a position of your own. So, here is a template you can use to develop an outline plan for your essay. This is a very simple and it includes just the broad sections. So, you have a title for your essay, then introduction, main body and conclusion. So, here is the sample plan for the task we just looked at, that is academic qualifications or of little practical benefit in the real world. So, introduction, you might include some information about variety of different qualifications we have around us. So, professional degrees, then general qualifications and so on. Then these qualifications, these degrees, how are they awarded? There are different methods of assessing and awarding degrees. Some have practical component, some include more focus in fact on a practical component, some have only theoretical component. Then some have marking system, some have grades, some give more focus on continuous assessment, some have end semester and so on. So, all those details probably you would keep in mind, but at this level you just include this you will explore further when you go looking for information. Then so this is one side. So, you are saying the qualifications are necessary. Why? So, some points are international requirements for professional. For example, if one has to be a doctor, one has to have a medical degree like an MBBS or an MD and so on. Students get a chance to study latest theories, interact with experts and learn as part of their courses. So, student, for them it is a golden opportunity to gather more information, because they get to study latest theories, they interact with experts, some have hands-on experience components. So, all these matter a lot. So, therefore, if you have some qualification, so it means you have some knowledge about that field. Then qualifications lead to better salaries and promotion. Say for example, you join an institute as a teacher just with a master's degree, and then you do your PhD, then your salary and your may be hiked, you will also get some promotion. So, these qualifications they are in some way linked to salaries and promotion. So, again note here, these are the first thoughts which have come to your mind. So, as you explore further, you may add or delete from this list. So, this is one side of the story, why academic qualifications are necessary. The second, why they are not necessary. Many professionally successful people do not have qualifications. So, some examples: Henry Ford, who built the assembly line and who started manufacturing cars, or Steve Jobs, more recent example. So, this does not, so these examples show that it is not necessary to have a university degree, say in engineering, to build something. Second point, many qualified people do not have jobs. This is also true. Many people come out of universities and colleges in India, but how many of them have jobs? So, conclusion, you can take this position: qualifications are useful, but do not guarantee success in life. So, it is a kind of a balanced approach. Now, you can attempt to develop plan for the tasks given here. I will very quickly go through these. So, can RTI eradicate corruption in India? Why not? So, this is right to information. The question gives you scope to take either of the positions. Yes, if you say yes, then you have to say why. If you say no, then again you have to give reasons. What are the most effective ways to completely stop sexual harassment of women at workplace? So, you have to think of ways, you list them, you give details. As people rely more and more on technology to solve problems, the ability of humans to think for themselves will surely deteriorate. Illustrate with examples. This is again a statement. So, keyword is illustrate with examples. You have to think of examples to support this statement. Last one, compare and contrast the experiences of reading a book and visiting a new place. So, there are two entities here. The task asks you to look at similarities and differences. So, you plan your essay accordingly. So, in this lecture, we started looking at how we plan an essay. The first step is looking at the task given and analyze it and understand clearly what it means. So, we saw that we need to look at command word, specific focus, and then be very sure what we are going to include and what we are not going to. On the basis of that, we develop a tentative plan so that it helps us in go looking for resources, and it will streamline our research and help write an effective essay. We will continue. Thank you.